I was always curious about, in 1994 when you were the champion, they had you drop the belt of the Survivor Series to Bob Backlund. And I always kind of felt like that, because it was going to be a short run, it was going to go to Diesel. Why was that not Owen, do you think? Because it felt like he, after the year he'd had with you, like, that title reign would have been something that maybe would have fit him.
Well, I don't know. Vince is a funny guy. He comes up with stuff. I would say I always thought Vince. I liked a lot of Vince's, most of Vince's thinking and ideas and stuff. I really thought he was, and maybe still is, kind of a genius in that category. But I think that they just wanted to do something with Bob Backlund and bring him back and revive the name and play off the history that they'd already built around him. And I remember when they first came to me and said, "We're going to do this. We're going to do this storyline where you lose to Bob Backlund." And I was like, "Really, Bob Backlund? Like, he's like ancient now." And I remember that was when they were started with Macho Man and the Hulk. Were in WCW, and Vince started running those little things about was it the Nacho? New
Generation. No, Nacho Man and the Huckster.
Nacho Man and the Huckster and all that kind of stuff. And they had a guy imitating Ted Turner, and it was all a jab at these billionaires, like Vince poking Ted Turner in the eye with making fun of Hogan. And they're all like the old generation. I remember there was like, we're the new generation. And so you're playing up the whole new generation. I remember when he told me about Bob Backlund, I go, well, he's older than Hogan and he's older than... And I remember I told Vince, I said, I think it's a really bad idea. I'm just telling you, I love Bob Backlund, but don't put the belt on Bob Backlund. Put it on, I named like 3 or 4 other guys they could put the belt on. And he told me that's what they were going to do. And I went home from that trip, and I remember thinking about it, and it really got to me. So I thought, Bob Backlund, just so you know, was one of the nicest guys there ever was in the wrestling business, and one of the, a real legit, real wrestler, tough guy, just a super nice, one of the nicest guys you could ever meet. And I remember when I was in Japan wrestling, and Bob Backlund, I was in Japan wrestling and was with some of the biggest names in wrestling at the time, from Abdullah the Butcher to Dusty Rhodes to all these big name guys, Hogan included. They never bought beer for the younger guys, the guys lesser than them on the card. And I can remember they never did squat for me. They never picked up and bought me a beer. Not that they needed to, but they didn't give a shit about, even though they were making 4 or 5 times what we were making. They never really cared about their peers on the card. And I remember Bob Backlund flew in on one of my last trips that I had at that time. He flew into Japan. He worked one match with Inoki, and he bought about 25 cases of beer for all the wrestlers on a big, long bus trip back to Tokyo from somewhere. And I just thought, he hardly even knows us, and he bought all of us beer, and he was such a nice guy. I remember he was such a classy champion, and I had so much respect for him. In fact, I always tried to emulate Bob Backlund and be like him. And so I remember I thought about it for a couple of days, and I realized how selfish that was to think that I always thought, if I was Bob Backlund and some young guy, like someone like Seth Rollins or somebody said, "Hey, I refuse to even wrestle Bret Hart, he's too old." I mean, and I understand that because I was going through the same thing with Bob Backlund, but at the same time, I was like, just out of respect and for what he contributed to the business and everything. I remember I called Vince when I got home and I said, I just want to apologize and tell you that I totally get it. I have no problem with what you want to do with Bob Backlund. In fact, I want to work really hard to make it work, and I'm totally behind it. And I have no problems at all with it, and I've thought it all over, and I got a different take on it now. And so I always... I don't know about everyone else, but I love the Survivor Series match that I had with Bob Backlund. I think it's one of my all-time favorite matches. It's just such a funny match when you watch it back today. It was a very complicated match. I remember, and that was one of those matches where I don't know if Vince was taking LSD or what, but I remember he definitely been stayed up all night and with milk and cookies or something. And we got to Survivor Series, and he laid out this really elaborate kind of match with all the whole thing. And I remember going, this is a pretty good match. Like Vince laid out the entire match almost like step for step. And I remember then we sort of smoothed it all out and made it all fit right. And we put together, like, if you look at all the players, like Davey, Owen, my mom, my dad, Bob Backlund. I don't know if Bob had a manager or not. I can't remember anymore. But it was a lot of complicated chess pieces where everyone had to be at the right time. And then when this happens, Davey's got to jump up, and Owen's got to be standing over here when that happens. And when that happens, this happens. And it was a very complicated match. And if you ever watch it back, it comes off perfectly. There's only one little hitch in that match, and that's where Davey got, I think he was chasing Owen, and Owen dropped down, and he tripped over Owen, and he ran into the steel stairs and almost knocked himself out for real. So he's lying on the padded mat, selling it. He's got to stay down for the rest of the match now. And I just remember, like, my mom, the whole thing happens when Bob Backlund's got me in that cross-faced chicken wing, and I can't quite get to the ropes, and Owen's there pleading with my mom to get up out of their chair and throw the towel in and all that stuff. And I just remember my poor mom, we forgot when we kind of mapped all this out that my mom's got to walk over and like step over top of Davey to get to the ropes to throw the towel. I always think it's so funny because it's like, oh, it's just her son-in-law. You know, he doesn't really matter. Not like her two sons. And it's the one thing when I watch, I always start laughing because my dad and my mom are oblivious to that their son-in-law is like in critical condition, knocked out on the floor. But anyway, it was. I always think it was a really fun match. I love that memory, and that was one of my better memories with Owen. I think that was as good a match, and Owen's involvement made it really special.